Hello, everyone. Let's see here. Just putting some stuff away before I get into this so I can focus. I don't know about the rest of you, but it's super important for me. Like, if I have too much shit up, it just catches my attention. It distracts me. But I know that some people, and I've heard an interesting quote before. I forget who it was from, but they said like an empty desk is a sign of an empty mind, and so they had like just a ton of shit all over their desk often. Um, for me, I don't know that I agree with that. I think one could make an argue that a focused desk is, like clean, organized, and whatever the task at hand in front of you, so that you can focus on it, would be a focus mind to get stuff done. So I prefer to not have a whole bunch of junk, although it kind of creeps in anyway, just because there's lots of stuff I want to grab at while I'm working, and things like that. I think it varies for people, though. So, today, first off, I'm trying to use the new camera again. It didn't go so well last night. It did for the first 45 minutes, and then it started shutting off, and I think that's because it was getting too hot. I have a 4K monitor that I'm looking at right now, and I believe I can feel a little bit of heat coming off. And then I have another monitor on top, and this camera's kind of sitting between both monitors. So I'm getting off heat? I don't know. Anyway, despite it being relatively cool in Phoenix at night now, enough that I have my balcony door open over here, it didn't cool the room down enough, I guess. And the best I can figure is that the camera was overheating, so I've changed the settings on it to not shut down when it gets too hot. I've got the air conditioner going despite it being 66 degrees out, just because there's so much tech in here that it gets so fucking hot. Um, and also a little more airflow, hopefully in here and everything. So hopefully the camera doesn't cut out on me, but if so, I still have the other webcam set up. I can switch over to it, we can keep going, and I'll try to keep figuring this out. But hopefully it works. Also, I have an idea for a very cool stream, probably in a few weeks around Christmas, and I think I might talk about that sometime in the next few days, so I get a little bit more clear about it. It's actually something I've been thinking about doing for a year now, as I've been working on becoming a life coach, knowing I'd start streaming on Twitch and all that kind of stuff. I thought of something I really wanted to do that I think would be really cool, kind of bring a community together, all that kind of stuff. So, just kind of keep an eye out for that if you are a regular viewer of this stream. And today, I'm going to try to keep talking about MBTI. It doesn't bother me at all when the chat talks and asks me questions, and last night that's what happened. As I was about 20-30 minutes in on MBTI, we started talking to someone who was, kind of struggling with social anxiety, and my parents have been kind of, what's the word? Critical of them for most of their lives about what they do, what job they should have, just kind of, you're always wrong, you're doing the wrong things, we don't agree kind of thing. I kind of went through my own experience with that, how I changed that and shifted the relationship with my parents, specifically my dad, who, interestingly enough, I was just chatting with over text message earlier today after he had some dental work done. Just kind of catching up and, decent relationship now. And I came from that, and it wasn't because my father changed at all. It was because I changed, and I changed how I reacted, and by me choosing a different road, it just started diffusing the situations, and it totally changed the paradigm of our relationship. So if you are struggling with something like that, I would recommend watching last night's stream. But I was getting into MBTI, and if anyone wants to talk, and about something other than MBTI, we can totally do that. If you have questions, I'm always happy to take questions from anyone. I prefer actually chatting with you on chat than just monologuing about shit. So, but if chat is not talking, then I need something to talk about. So I'm going to talk about MBTI today. Now, yesterday I did make the point. A lot of people might say, well, this is not scientifically rigorous. The Big Five personality test is the more accepted scientific personality test nowadays. I think the Big Five is great. I think MBTI, despite not being super scientific, and what some people might call like rudimentary, has its benefits and advantages in ways that I just think the Big Five personality test can't really compare. So, as I was saying last night, when it comes to MBTI, it really gave me three things. Number one, it helped me not feel like an alien. I'm an INFP. If you don't know what that means yet, just know that it's pretty rare, and pretty rare among males as well. And especially because of what that type is, it's very idealistic, caring, romantic, creative, all that kind of stuff. Just growing up like that and feeling very different than everyone else, it's a struggle for a lot of male INFPs. It's also a struggle for the females in that you're just struggling with emotions like so much. But those traits are kind of considered more feminine anyway, so it's more acceptable. And I'm not saying it's unacceptable to have emotions as a man. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying growing up as a teenager, you know, people just, we're not all enlightened in the world, unfortunately. Teenagers can be mean. Like, kids can be mean, people can be mean, adults can be mean, right? And we're all different. So I thought I was just like damaged or something, like I was like, well, maybe it's because of all like my depression and trauma that's like also kind of making me this way. Instead, it was like a double whammy where I had this going on as far as who I was, and then the trauma and depression and anxiety and all that just multiplied everything, and I was a wreck as a teenager. I was a real wreck. So, in my 20s, I found this. It's about 2008, I think. So I would have been about 24. And that was probably the first time in my life when I was like, wait a minute. I took the test. I got a different type at first. I got INTP, and then I was like, yeah, this kind of fits. There's certainly aspects about this. Then I took it again, and I got INTP, and I am an INFP, and that's the letter that I'm not super one way or the other on the spectrum, because it's all a spectrum. No one's 100% extroverted or introverted. That one was a little confusing, but once I saw this other one, I was like, oh my god, this is me. Like, how does this know who I am? And if they know who I am, there's other people like this, because it's saying that this is one of 16 personality types. And then I found a community and a message board of people for all types, but then sub forums for each type, and I immediately had a kinship with just about everyone there. It was like the first time in my life I was reading posts and I completely understood them and what they were saying and what I was reading, and when I posted it was the same thing. It was just like, it was such a revelation. It was life-changing for me, actually. Also, then I realized, oh, well, if these are like my people, now what does that mean about the other people in my life? And, how's that work? Then I realized I kind of, you can't technically type other people, but you kind of can. You can make really strong guesses and kind of get close. And I realized my wife at the time was a type that just there was no coming together and alignment on anything. It was butting heads and different values over and over and over, totally different communication styles. Just everything was a struggle. Yeah, it was just... it made me realize that, trying wasn't going to be enough. There are people that you have to try in every relationship. But depending on just how much the personality type maybe meshes with you, it's going to be that much more of a struggle. Or not. If they're super aligned, you guys are going to have really great communication. The thing about that, though, is you might be so close together that you both have the same weaknesses and you don't complement one another enough, right? Then you might have one like a step removed from that where there is some communication struggles. It's not like perfect, but the other person, the benefit to that is that they can complement you a little bit. But then you get to a point where you're so alien to one another that it's just like, it's just a struggle, and that's all it is. And it's not even fun. And that's kind of what it was. And this made me, although when I first, I tried at first to like start seeing things her way and communicating with her about based on what I knew, but at a certain point I was just like, this is never going to get better. This is never going to get better. There is nothing here. We're just lying to ourselves. And it never was even good in the first place, if we're being really honest. It was more an issue of two damaged people coming together rather than there being any true love. And I think her and I both recognized that like really, really fast after we separated. And the third thing is, unlike the big five, which it can kind of help, I just don't find it to be as easy helping in this way. Not only does it kind of inform you about yourself, but it can help you answer some questions if you're stuck on certain things. So it's like, if you're in a job that you really don't like, by knowing this, you can go and see kind of like, well, what careers are kind of typical for people like this? And you might find that what seemed like a good idea, maybe because your parents told you, they kind of tried to direct you into a certain career because that made sense for them. Now you're doing it and you're finding that you're miserable. And then it's when you kind of understand yourself more and understand who you are and kind of what you need and what would be exciting for you. One thing is, it can help inform you if you really don't know. But often we kind of have a general idea deep down of a direction, but sometimes we just don't want to admit it to ourselves. And in this way, it can be really beneficial and useful to have something that kind of reaffirms, like, yes, no, this is kind of who you are. This is okay to go down, especially if you are not someone who is good for like the corporate world, right? Like nowadays, a lot of advice is something like, go get your college degree and go get a job working at a company, and that way you'll have benefits and security and a paycheck and all that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of people that don't have that, and it's not necessarily like, there's times I would love to just be able to work for a company and just clock in and get my paycheck and know that I'm okay, and unless a big layoff comes along or something. But generally speaking, I'd be okay. And if I just show up and trade my time for money, it's, you know, it's all good. I just have to, take orders from the boss and be on their schedule and all that kind of stuff. I can't do that. I literally, I can if I need to survive, but that takes such a toll on my mental health that I wind up super depressed to the point of being suicidal if enough years have gone on with it. I had a perfectly fine job working for Verizon Wireless, doing tech support on the phones, which for an introvert, that's why I looking back now, I'm super appreciative for the experience, and I'm a fucking amazing troubleshooter. I'm one of the best natural troubleshooters that I know, and I know a decent amount of techie people. But I had to go from not wanting to talk to anyone ever. I at one point I was working for 10-hour shifts, so for 10 hours a day on the phone, non-stop calls coming in, using my brain to troubleshoot for 10 hours straight, with breaks, actually, not straight, but 10 hours in a day, mostly straight, minus a lunch and two 15-minute breaks and a 10-minute break. It's like, that's really taxing for anyone. It's extremely taxing for an introvert. It's extremely taxing for someone like me who, that kind of communication is so draining. I was basically dead on my days off. I just it was all I could do to recover, just to then go back to work. And I then went to normal 8-hour shifts. But it was brutal. It was brutal. It helped me to become good talking on the phone, which later helped me with sales calls, talking with clients, all that kind of stuff. So I'm super appreciative for it. But nonetheless, while that was a perfectly fine job, there were perfectly good people working it there that I worked with, people I really liked. Especially a job in my early 20s, no less. I mean, I was 22 when I got that job. What was it? It was 2006, so yeah, I was 22. 22, back then, making like just over 30,000 a year. Just kind of starting with no college or anything like that. Listen, it wasn't that bad. But it just wasn't for me. So if you're struggling, if you're working a career you don't like, you don't know what's going on, you don't know what you really want to do, you don't know why the job isn't right for you, you want to know what kind of job might be right for you, what kind of skills or traits you have that should be used in a job, it can really help. It can also really help, like I said, with compatibility, not just in your romantic relationships, but with your friends too. You can find out, oh, this is, we line up on a lot of stuff, but this is a difference between us. This is why we struggle sometimes. This is just part of who they are. This is stuff I could do to make that go more smoothly in the future, so that by understanding them a little bit better, maybe I can communicate more effectively to them about what they care about, what their values are, use their language a little bit if I can figure it out, so on and so forth. Let's go over here. So, what's your personality type? 16 different types, broken up because there's 4 letters. Each letter has 2 options. First letter, I or E, this is related to extroversion or introversion. I probably don't need to go too deep into this. However, there is a misconception that if you're introverted, it means you're a loner. It means you're kind of socially stunted. Things like that. That's not necessarily the case. And extroversion doesn't necessarily mean the case that you are always around other people and you don't like alone time. What it really comes down to is kind of how you recharge and like kind of what you would overall prefer to do. Not every single time, just kind of overall. If it was a Friday night, let's say on 4 or 5 out of 6 nights, what would you prefer to do? Would you prefer to go out to the club, bar, to a sporting event, just go over to a friend's house, like a get-together, a block party, go to the movies with your friends, just go to a restaurant and have a dinner with them? If 4 or 5 out of 6 times you prefer that, you're probably extroverted. If you would rather hang home, uh, watch a movie with just you or your spouse, or maybe one other close friend or something like that, maybe 2 close friends, or you know, or even just a roommate or something, you'd rather read a book, you'd rather be on your computer playing video games, you'd rather, well, and that's not true, because you can be extroverted and you can use video games, especially online games, to connect and be with other people too, you know, especially if you're streaming or something. But if you would rather just kind of, if other people drain you and you need to go be alone to recharge, you're probably more introverted. Again, no one is 100% of anything. It doesn't, just because I'm very, very, very introverted, doesn't mean I can't talk on a stream to people. It doesn't mean I can't show up and, you know, run an event on Nexus, the game I play, which is an MMO where the players take charge a lot and, you know, kind of create events and all that kind of stuff for other players. It doesn't mean that I don't like going to a hockey game with some friends once in a while. It doesn't mean I don't like going to bars. I do, once in a while. But I usually need a little bit of advance notice. I'm not one to kind of just be like, oh, let's go out tonight. I'm like, I actually need to prepare myself a little bit mentally and emotionally for it, and then I need to know that I have some downtime after it. Can your type ever change over time? This is a good question, actually. I think there's a few aspects to this, and I'm gonna try to cover them because this goes kind of deep. Number one, your brain, if it is physically altered, your personality type can change. There is, as much as, you know, I believe in, like, let's say, like a soul, and that there's, like, let's say a metaphysical you. It is the case, and there are actually documented examples of this, where there was a guy, I can't remember his name, but like way back in the day, he was considered like the nicest dude ever. And something happened where like a spike somehow went through his head and like knocked out a part of his brain. Like, and he was like a nice guy. He was diligent. He, in as far as the Big Five goes, that would be considered conscientious. You know, just everyone liked this guy, and because his part of his brain was damaged, his personality completely changed. He became the biggest asshole, couldn't hold a job, like, just his life went to absolute shit. And while I have no idea if he was like one MBTI type, you know, and then became another, and you know, your level of assholishness is not measured by MBTI, so you know, I'm not saying that it necessarily changed him, but it did change him, as at least as far as like his diligence or conscientiousness, which is kind of a trait here a little bit, usually in the S and N letters, and also the J and P letters, which I'll get into in a little bit. So that's one way. If your brain is physically manipulated somehow, if a part of it gets damaged, it can actually change things. The second way is trauma can actually affect this, and we all, not just trauma or grief, but even just what we'll call lessons. And this isn't necessarily that your type has changed so much as you might be covering up your type or trying to alter it because of a reality that you experienced where you had to be a different way. I'll give you an example. In Jungian psychology, this is kind of called the shadow self. Now, the shadow self, a lot of people think that, or shadow traits, let's say, not just self. A lot of people hear the word shadow and they assume, oh, it's bad, or these are traits that you're trying to suppress about yourself because they're bad. They're not necessarily bad. It's just you have been taught that they're bad somehow. I'll give you a good example of this. Let's say you were just kind of a talkative, extroverted child, right? But your parents were introverted and they felt you were always loud, always telling you to shut up, that you needed to be quiet, you know, you're too loud, you're too this, you're too that. So you've gotten the message that talking and being kind of exuberant and, you know, just kind of vocalizing to other people is bad, right? So you begin to suppress that side of you. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're not extroverted. It's that you have been forced to adjust to act more introverted than you otherwise would because of these lessons you got. And then as you get older, if you undid that by kind of working on some grief recovery or working on yourself or trying to just learn to express yourself more naturally, more in tune with kind of who you really are and what your personality type and traits are, your extroversion might come back online as you clear that shit out. So, did your personality type change? It was kind of there, but it de facto changed in a way. The last thing I will say is that even then, I think it's the case that it's possible anyway. And again, I think I think it's not necessarily that the personality type changes. I think it's your expression of yourself and your personality changes. And I'm trying to think of how to say this. A lot of my the core of who I am and how I operate has not changed. So what I'm going to get into in a little bit is a lot of people see these letters and they hear about the personality type, and that's actually just kind of a, you know, it's like, okay, INFP, right? Let's just look at this real fast. INFP: sensitive, creative, idealistic, perceptive, caring, loyal, value inner harmony and personal growth, focus on dreams and possibilities. That is actually just kind of the first level of MBTI. What it gets down to is your cognitive functions and talks about your thought processes and how you actually operate in the world. Those things haven't really changed for me. However, as I have gone through different experiences in my life, had to reflect, had to change my own philosophy and beliefs and everything, because I was going, I had arrived at the bottom after a very, you know, a big fall in my life. My cognitive functions haven't changed. Those descriptors haven't changed. How I show them has changed. In the sense that, you know, when it says caring, right? I see a lot of people talking about, you know, wanting to help others, and they feel bad for others, and, you know, it's like, well, you know, the world brought them down and all that kind of stuff, and we want to be compassionate to people, we want to give charity to people, we want to, and I'm not saying, you know, charity or anything is bad, but I think there's a perfectly good time and place for it to help people out. But, you know, we kind of almost want to throw money and resources at people who are down. And you know, I think I was in line with that way of thinking before. And then when I realized just how much of a personal responsibility I had, my shifting kind of changed to um, more of a model that I remember in college, in one of the few college classes I actually took and attended, the teacher was talking about Andrew Carnegie. And Andrew Carnegie believed in philanthropy and all that kind of stuff. However, he didn't think you just, give someone money or something like that. What he did was he went and built tons of libraries so that people who wanted to take the responsibility to better themselves could go in and study for free and learn and all that kind of stuff and pull themselves out of the situation that they're in. Now, I'm certainly not saying that, well, everyone should just pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Don't misunderstand me. I'm certainly not saying that just helping someone when they're really down. I've been helped, when I was really down and just needed a handout. But like and I think there's a time for that. And interestingly enough, at the top of this, I talked about an idea I had, and it actually kind of relates to that. So I'm not saying that that stuff's not good, but because my thinking's evolved, how I approach things now, how I look at certain things politically or just philosophically, has altered through experiences. And so, some people might say my personality changed because it's like, well, I used to have viewpoints that have changed because of my experiences. But the root of them, what I'm still trying to accomplish as far as caring about people, about being idealistic and all that kind of stuff, that stuff has changed. Now, to be fair, some people look at this and they think it's all bullshit. And I do know at least one Nexus player who has said that who they were as a child is completely different than who they are as an adult. And so they thought all this personality type stuff was bullshit because, they used to be super, super quiet and now they can't shut up. I don't know that that technically invalidates this. I think this still works for a lot of people. And I think, based on what I just said about the three different things that I just went through, as far as how personality might change, it's possible that they had an experience like that, which would, explain their own change. So, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I can think of in relation to that. I really don't think your type necessarily changes, because how your brain functions. That's actually at the root of all of this. How your brain functions, it can evolve. And you can also work to kind of train it to so like, you have strengths and you have weaknesses, right? And how your brain functions also kind of has some strengths and weaknesses, because if you operate in one way, that means you can't necessarily operate in another way. You could be really strong in introversion, for example, but while you might always prefer to be alone, you could grow your extroversion a little bit, in the sense that being around people might not impact you as greatly by exposing yourself to it more often. So if you otherwise don't often go out, but then you start making it a point to go, I'm going to go to lunch every Saturday with a friend just to get out more. And those first few times might take more of a toll on you, but then as you do it more often, again, it's not so much that your extroversion increased, you just got a little stronger or more resilient, or you grew that aspect of yourself. Another good example is between the T and F letters, which you're thinking and feeling. So if you really wanted to kind of boil this down, and some MBTI purists might get on my case about it, but I'm just trying to put it in real terms. thinking people kind of, like it says right here, they make decisions in an impersonal way using logical reasoning, whereas feelers base decision on personal values and how your actions affect others. Um, Realistically, people who are like strong in T, you can think of them more as like engineers. They're interested in things. They're more objective. They're more impersonal. People who are strong in F would be more nurses, therapists. They're interested in people more than things. They are more personal in how they interact and do things. Now, again, like I am an F type, but I think because of how much I work around tech, how I've had to learn about tech, and just maybe kind of even having a natural attunement. Maybe it's not that my personality type has changed, but I actually have a decently strong T side to me as well. Like, I'm being kind of vague about this, and I know I was just talking about cognitive functions, and those don't necessarily change. But again, I think it's the case that you can mitigate your weakness on some of these letters, or where you've, if you were super high in thinking, for example, let's say you're just very logical but very engineered. If you spent time in like a group therapy or something like that, for whatever reason, you might bring some aspects of feeling out. You might grow that muscle a little bit by doing something over and over that, I'm not saying the T wouldn't be there anymore, but yes, it is another dog, actually. That's Roxy. So we have Oberon and Roxy. Roxy is not often in here, mainly because she's a yip-yip dog, and she can be really loud. But she's, I try to keep her out just in case that happens, but today she's hanging out here. So, I think that kind of covers the MBTI, like, can type change thing. The cognitive functions are a really big deal. I'm going to get to those in a moment, but I'm going to stay on the letters just to get through this part first. So extroversion, introversion, I kind of covered that. I think it's pretty straightforward. How do you prefer to take in information? That's the second letter. It's S or N. There's sensing or intuition. Realistically, sensors are very present. It's the here and now, the reality of how things are, concrete facts. They have very linear thought processes, I would say, very practical. They talk in very specific and literal ways. Whereas if you're intuitive, like I am, your head is in the cloud, you are a big picture thinker, you play with ideas and you connect ideas constantly. You describe things, like it says here, in figurative or poetic language. It's kind of vague, it's kind of mushy, kind of out there a little bit. And it's funny. I saw a graphic once that kind of talked about how S's and N's, the differences in how they think. And so for the S, it was like, you start with a thought, and it's like process gets you to the next thought. Process gets you to the next, and then it's like answer at the end, right? It's like think about this to this to this to this to this thing. For intuitives, the way it works is you think about a thought, and then you go through some like weird portal, and then you arrive at the answer. So it's this one, the S and the N, this is where communication can really be tough between two different types. Probably, I don't want to say necessarily more so than other letters, but definitely far more than extroverts. Like extrovert and introvert, it doesn't really matter as far as communication goes. But S and N, if you're talking, I'm an N, and if I'm talking to someone who is an S, there can be a lot of misunderstandings on important issues, because they might be saying, well, here's the facts of the situation, and like, this is what it is, so like, what's the problem? And I'm like, but this is what it means, and here's how things connect and all that. And they're like, no, but fact, 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 fact. And I'm like, yeah, but you know, weird, vague, mushy connections, and ideas connect this way, and I'm bringing up examples, and they're like, why the fuck did you even bring that up? That's something that's totally disconnected. I'm like, but I'm trying to make points and show like in an analogy way how it works and all that. And like, that can be a challenge. On the plus side, if you're in a relationship, let's say, or like even just with a friendship, where you have an S and an N type, you can cover for one another. So if I'm always up in the clouds, an S-type is going to be more grounded. They can help ground me, but I can help get them thinking about a bigger picture, or more meaning in their life, or things like that, right? So it's the second letter. Third one, T or F, I just talked about that a little bit before, thinking versus feeling. This is really just... This can be... actually this one requires a little bit of discussion, actually. There are people who think, actually a lot of us think we're logical. You're not nearly as logical as you think you are. You actually feel a certain way, and then you build your logic off of that. And this is why it's utterly ridiculous if you think the other political party is stupid. I mean, like truly stupid. You can look and say, well, they're stupid because they're not looking at this, right? And there are a lot of people who are maybe underinformed or just not truly looking at an issue. But like, let's say you take someone who's really informed about the issues. The thing is, their values and their beliefs are going to make them feel a certain way about it, and then they will find the evidence and facts that support their beliefs. Let's say, for example, you have liberals and conservatives, and let's say we're talking about some kind of social spending. The liberal side will go, but look at all the metrics here of how we helped people, right? It's like, we helped a bunch of kids get fed. We helped this, we helped that, right? On the opposite side, the conservatives might be looking at the cost to the rest of society and going, look how inefficient this is. Look at how much money was wasted and burned. It's not that we don't want to help people. It's just, this is like not a way to do it. And the liberals might go, well, like, if we're helping people, why are we even concerned about the cost? Like, fuck the cost. Like, helping people matter more than money. And the conservatives might be going like, yeah, but there's like a reality, because like money, even though we're the government and we print money, economics and inflation are still things, even if we do that. So, and then it comes down to a more, again, root issue of like, well, how do we help people? Do we just give them things, or do we build libraries, right? And so to say like one side doesn't care, although that can be the case, they're certainly not all good people, especially politicians and stuff like that. To just write people off as stupid or that they don't care, it's actually just a values difference about how they feel about things at the root. And different values aren't necessarily bad or evil or stupid or anything like that. So now the point here, though, is you can feel a certain way, and you can value logic and being impersonal and a thinker, and then go, okay, well, this is what I value. How am I going to look at this? And again, this is kind of where the cognitive functions also come into play, because if the thinking is a very high order cognitive function, they are just naturally going to start processing things this way in the first place. In the sense that they would go, okay, well, we need to look at this. What's the most efficient way to deal with this problem? Whereas someone who is a feeler might go, what is the most helpful way to deal with this problem, right? If we just listened to one side or the other, and we didn't try to find middle ground, we'd probably go broke trying to help people if we listened to all the feelers, and no one would get helped if we just listened to all the thinkers, or it would be like so limited, you know. So, both sides matter is kind of what I'm saying here. But this, and that's just in regards to politics, but this personality type test and all the different letters all kind of matter, and we need all different kinds of people to make a whole society work. Because if we were all just one type, we'd be robots. And some people are good at being mechanics, and others are good at being therapists. And some people are good at being businessmen, and some people are good at being politicians, and some people are good at being parents. Some people are good at being librarians. Some people are good at being teachers. Some people are good at being welders. It's like that's kind of how all this adds up and why. The last letters, J and P, judging or perceiving. How do you prefer to live your outer life? The easiest way to think about this is if you are a judger, you probably have a very strict calendar. You're like, you are on the ball. It's like, I have 15 minutes to do this, and then I move on to this thing, and then I move on to this thing. Think rules and deadlines should be respected. Prefer to have detailed step-by-step instructions. You make plans. Everything's planned out. You have your to-do list and all that kind of stuff. P, for perceiving, this person probably doesn't use a calendar. It's very wide open. Things are flexible. Go with the flow. Let's spontaneous. Like, I don't know. We'll figure out what we want to do on Friday night when the time comes, whatever we're feeling. Whereas like a judger's like, no, are we going to a restaurant? Because like I need to schedule this into my calendar. Again, as far as types changing go, despite being a P, I, as an entrepreneur and someone who just has a lot of goals and wants to get shit done, have had to really strengthen this side of myself. I have a calendar that I live and a to-do list that I live by. I'm not as strict about it as like a J would, where it's like, okay, it's time to move on. I'm actually constantly moving stuff around in the calendar. But I'm just kind of aiming to be, to adhere to it as best I can to make sure that I get stuff done. And actually at this point, because of the idea of time blocking, where it's like, okay, I expect this task to take this long, I can put it in the calendar, I can time block out all the tasks and things I got to get done that week, and then I can feel actually a sense of peace where it's like, if I even get remotely close, then I will have gotten the important things done, and I can see that I have the time to do it in addition to all the other things I need to do. Like, took Oberon for a walk today, I got on the treadmill today, I need some time for lunch, I'm going to be working on some marketing stuff related to the stream after I do this. But then I also have some downtime to watch a hockey game against our second most hated rivals tonight. Fuck the Flyers. So, again, has my personality type necessarily changed? No, but I shored up a lot of my weaknesses, and I have to work hard for this to happen. But I just couldn't be an entrepreneur who has clients, who has to answer calls, who has to meet with clients, on scheduled calls and all that, without having done this. And just because it's my personality type to be like, yeah, go with the flow, and like, I'm not the calendar type, isn't a fucking excuse. Sometimes you just have to do things. I hate when people use their MBTI types as an excuse. Well, that's just how I am. It's like, this doesn't give you permission to suck. This doesn't give you permission to, in my case, miss a client call, because it's like, oh yeah, I'm just not the calendar type. Well, become the fucking calendar type then, because you have responsibilities. You're an adult. Just because it's not your natural thing doesn't mean that, like, in some of these, you might not have to shore up your weaknesses, strengthen them a little bit, and all that kind of stuff. I do think it makes more sense to double down on your strengths in most cases, but you have to at least have like a basic capability in the letter that you're not. It's like and again, we're all on a spectrum, right? You have to have a basic capability to go out with friends once in a while, even if you're strongly introverted. You have to have a basic capability to look at some concrete facts and look at what's going on in the present and understand some practical applications rather than just have your head up in the clouds all the time if you're an N. You have to be able to make a few logical decisions even if you're an F like me. You have to be able to use a calendar even if you're a P like me. And vice versa. If you are a strong J, sometimes you need to just be okay with your plans changing. If you're strong in T, sometimes you need to be okay with putting aside strict logic and bringing some humanity and compassion into a decision. If you are a strong sensor, sometimes you need to actually look, think about the future a little bit more instead of just the present. And in doing so, it's like, where am I going with my life? And just kind of, you might feel pretty good day to day, but you also still need a direction that can help. And, again, if you're strongly extroverted, sometimes you do need to just take a night off. And, my sister is one of the most extroverted people I know. Like, I literally just hear about her life and I get tired. Like, I'm just like, how do you do what you do? How are you not dead? I don't understand. She is out every night. And there are still some nights, though, that she's so tired that she's just like, I just can't do it. And she'll go, and just stay at home that night and watch a movie or two or fuck around on TikTok. She's a lot younger than I am. And although I suppose I know people my age who are on TikTok too, but she needs that too. So all right. How do you find out your type? You go take a test. There's a million tests online. There's a million free ones. They all pretty much work. It is not a terrible idea to take 2 or 3 tests and just see if, 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 3 give you the same result. If you're really close, like I said, I was initially, it came up as an INTP, and I was like, yeah, that's close, because I do, original thinkers who enjoy speculation and creative problem solving. I love creative problem solving. I am imaginative. I am a great troubleshooter, and that's creative problem solving is troubleshooting, and vice versa, really. So that all made sense, but I was just like, okay, but this doesn't strongly resonate. And then when I took another one, I came across INFP, and that was just like, this is who I am. This is me. This makes sense. Yeah, some aspects on the other things. Again, I can even go up to INFJ, which again is just a letter off. Idealistic is a word in there as well, just like it is for INFP. You can have, because we both have the INF thing, actually, there's a lot of overlap there. And again, the INX, say X anytime it's like the letter is not known, or it could be either one in the middle. Same thing with INTP, there's some overlap there, right? A lot of my best friends or people I've been very, very close to in my life are ENFPs. And so our communication is great, but they're extroverts who kind of help drag me out of my shell. I'm the introvert who sometimes gets them to take a night off and we just chill at home. My sister is an ENFP. We click so well, aside from the fact that she is always out and I am always at home. And my best friend, when I lived in Houston, was an ENFP, and he'd be the one dragging me out, making me go to bars and be social and all that kind of stuff, and not just be a shut-in and a hermit all the time. So, take the test if this is at all interesting to you, if you don't already know your type. From there are a million websites that show you far more in depth than just what these things say. So, for example, this site that I've been finding lately, Truity, it's coming up a lot. I don't think this site existed back when I first did this test a long time ago, 12 years ago. It definitely seems to be a new business, and there's On some of these pages, there's a picture of someone who looks like this is the founder or whatnot. But right on here, personality tests, you can just, I believe, take it. I'm guessing it's free on this. Yeah, right here. Boom, you can just get right into it, start marking off, the questions on how much you agree or disagree with it, and it will help reveal your personality type at the end. I'm sure this one is as good as any other. Well, it could be even better. Might be worse. I don't know. Most of these tests are all pretty similar, though. And then you can go over here to Myers-Briggs Types and look at the different types. So I'm going to pull up INFP just because INFP, and I know them pretty well. Imaginative idealists, guided by their own core values and beliefs. To a healer, and each kind has like a term, along with it. So like INFP is the healer, INFJ is the counselor, INFJ is the teacher, the champion, and once you read the description, you can kind of get a sense of why they're calling it that. These are not official terms. Different websites have like different terms that they use for each one. This one happens to be the healer for INFP. I can go on another site and I might see something kind of related to it, but not exactly healer or something like that. Hit buttons on my keyboard back some. To a healer, possibilities are paramount. The realism of the moment is only a passing concern. They see a potential for a better future and pursue truth and meaning with their own individual flair. That's truth right there. Sensitive, caring, and compassionate, deeply concerned with the personal growth of themselves and others. This is why we're the natural therapists, the natural coaches. That's why what I'm doing right now is incredibly meaningful to me. I feel perfectly in alignment with who I am and what I'm supposed to be doing. Individualistic and non-judgmental, INFPs believe that each person must find their own path. That's kind of what I'm trying to help everyone do here, right? It's like, let's heal your trauma. Let me help heal you, and then let's get you going on your path. That's the entirety of my business, basically, and what I'm trying to help people do at the core and root of everything, right? But for someone who's let's say ISFJ, the protector, like this is that's not going to be what they're exactly looking to do. They could be compassionate and caring because they have the F. But if you look at their types, which I think is down, where is it? Careers. Let's switch over. Well, there might be social worker in there, which INFPs could kind of overlap there, and again, that's kind of where the F is coming from. I would never fucking be an agricultural or food scientist. I have no interest in that. Forensic science technician, dental assistant, dispensing optician, medical transcriptionist, optometrist, phlebotomist, podiatrist. I can't even tell you how financial clerk, general office, I could never, I would fucking die in these jobs. I would die. I'm half dead just looking at the list. So, yeah, the INFP personality type is also called healer because of their sympathetic idealism and gentle compassion, but the thoughtful idealist and the mediator. I've heard the mediator before as well. We can get into, what our values and motivations are, although I don't want to start going into necessarily each type right now, just because covering it's not necessary to cover each type. You go figure out your type. I'm only pulling this up as an example of the things you can kind of learn about and a little bit about myself. The important thing, and if you want to find some facts about yourself and your type and all that. This website has actually proven to be pretty good about it. There's another website too that I used to go to a lot way back in the day that I thought was pretty solid. And I just don't see it coming up, because if I saw the I don't think it's 16personalities.com. It might be. No. It was kind of a shittier site, so I'm not surprised it's not coming up in Google right now. But it had a lot of good information. But any of these sites, like, again, just once you figure out your type, go to 2 or 3 of them. Read about yourself a little bit. Go to find the subreddit. There's a subreddit for each type. However, if you are one of the types that, and there are literally some types who are likely to think this is all a bunch of bullshit. And so if you're one of those types, you probably won't dive into this too much after listening to me anyway. And those subreddits might be kind of dead, because they all probably think it's all a bunch of bullshit as well. So, again, though, what I want to get into is cognitive functions. So, there are 8 functions. What happens is you have 4 functions, and then the other 4 are ones that it would be basically very difficult, if not kind of impossible, for you to use them. But it's how you for example, like you can see right here, there's extroverted sensing and introverted sensing. So you're going to have one of your 4 functions is going to be sensing like this in the first place. It just matters if you kind of do it in an extroverted sense or an introverted sense. And I can get into that in a little bit. And then what happens is each different type, some of them might share the same primary one or a secondary one, or even 2 or 3 can kind of be in alignment sometimes. But each different type, therefore, the primary, the secondary, the tertiary, and the auxiliary functions are unique to that type, right? Maybe there's only even one off between one type and another, but you're unique basically to your type. So, extroverted sensing is using taste, touch, smell, movement, sight to easily absorb information in the physical world. So someone who leads with extroverted sensing is going to be super connected physically through their senses to the world. Like, this is what they're going to, this is going to be like a primary mode of thinking for them about like what their senses are actually picking up. Like, that's the primary thing, right? So someone like that, for example, might be an incredible sommelier, right? Because if their senses and what's going on in the outer world, they're so in tune with it, like, and that's where they're strongest. That's where you probably get people who are like super tasters, which is a thing where like those people have like incredibly sensitive taste buds and ability to taste different flavors and pick things out and whatnot. You might have, those are possibly the people with perfect pitch. It says here, they pick up on details other people don't notice, and some even have photographic memory, because again, visually they might be so good at they'd be so strong in the sense of sight, right, that they would remember like everything. Introverted sensing would be, understanding the world through past, present, and experience. More in tune with their bodies, as opposed to necessarily what the outer sensations are. Maybe it's more the inner sensations. Extroverted thinking versus introverted thinking. extroverted intuition versus introverted intuition, and extroverted feeling versus introverted feeling. So it kind of, depending on whether it's we're feeling, we're thinking, we're sensing, or intuition, right? So the second two letters. That combines with the first letter, or sorry, the second and third letters will combine with the first letter. So the second letters are S or N. S, sensing, it will combine with either an extroverted way of using it or an introverted way of using it. Or N, there's an extroverted way of using it or an introverted way of using it. The P and the J don't matter when it comes to the functions. Those don't apply. But the two middle letters, the second and third ones out of the four, that's really where these functions come from, and they are modified by whether you use them in an introverted or an extroverted way. It is not the case that you are using, just because you're introverted, your four functions are all introverted. Actually, you have two introverted and two extroverted functions, and they're listed in different ways. So I'm going to pull up the INFP ones, and I know this actually is find sight. Phi, introverted feeling, extroverted intuition, introverted sensing, and extroverted thinking is primary, secondary, and I'm going to try to get into that in a minute and see if I can get into it. Now I know it says the shadow processes, and it gets into the other four, but this, I'm not even going to bother getting into that. What really matters here is the primary processes. So when we describe these, even though it's introverted feeling, which would be if, and or introverted sensing, which would be is, we actually start with like sensing, or intuition we use as N because I is already for introverted. So we would say phi, feeling, introverted feeling would be capital F lowercase I, phi, in shorthand. Wish this doesn't really give a lot of good information about it. Let's see if I can find a better page for this stuff. Okay, cool. So for me, as an INFP, what are my cognitive functions? What can this tell me about myself? How do I know I am for sure an INFP? Because a lot of INFPs actually think they might be INFJs and vice versa, because there's a lot of overlap in personality type and how we kind of operate and express ourselves and all that kind of stuff. My dominant process, where I go first when I'm thinking about something, how do I internally feel about this? Right. So INFPs experience a great depth of feeling, but as introverts, they largely process these emotions internally. They possess an incredible sense of wonder about the world and feel great compassion and empathy for others. While these emotions are strong, they tend not to express them outwardly, which is why they can sometimes be mistaken as aloof or unwelcoming. The thing you could say about INFPs is still waters run deep. I am constantly looking at the world, not through, again, we just talked about extroverted sensing. That was the first one on the list on the other page. That's not it for me. It's like, how do I feel about this? What it actually is doesn't even fucking matter to me. It's how I feel about it. Oh, sorry, I've been saying secondary. Auxiliary is actually the term, and then inferior is the fourth one. My mistake. The auxiliary, the secondary function, is extroverted intuition. So here, what's happening is, again, remember, intuition is like super big picture thinking. And I'm looking at the world and all its possibilities in super big picture way. So the way I operate is like, how do I feel about something, and then what are the possibilities, and like what can we do about this kind of thing. So their inner lives are a dominant force in personality, and they engage with the outside world by using their intuition. They focus on the big picture, that things will shape the course of the future. And things that will shape the course of the future. This ability helps make INFPs transformative leaders who are excited about making positive changes in the world. It's because of these two main functions working together that INFPs are really who they are, and why they have the traits that they do, why we kind of go into the different career paths that we do, why we are why we value what we value, all those kinds of things. Now, they can be expressed in different ways because of our experiences, because of, my values might be slightly different than someone else's values, even if we often share similar values. Again, the experiences that I've gone through help shape my values and beliefs and change them over time, or evolve them would be a better way of saying it. But I still see and operate in the world the same way. I still have the same desires to do stuff with myself and my time. I still have the same goals. I'm still looking to do the same things and helping people and all that, because I am looking at the world and thinking, how do I feel about this or that? If I feel bad about it, then I'm going, what can be done to fix and change this, right? What can we do to change it? I'm not looking necessarily at practical applications, like right here, right now, what is 1 or 2 steps that I can do. I'm looking at the big picture. What are all the problems? How would we design a new system that would fix this to make things better for people? Just getting a little sore. Super important to have backup water as a streamer. Actually, I do that for clients too, when I'm on client calls that I know will be more than any amount of time, even an hour. I always have 2 drinks on hand. The tertiary function, Introverted Sensing. We went over this just a little bit before. When taking in information, INFPs create vivid memories of the events. They will often replay these events in their minds to analyze experiences in less stressful settings. Such memories are usually associated with strong emotions, so recalling a memory can often seem like reliving the experience itself. I don't want to say that other people are incapable of doing this, or that they don't have really strong memories or anything like that, but yeah, that's absolutely the case. And the inferior, extroverted thinking. This cognitive function involves organizing and making sense of the world in an objective and logical manner. While this is a largely unconscious influence in the INFP's personality, it can show itself in times of pressure. When faced with stress, an INFP might become suddenly very pragmatic and detail-oriented, focusing on logic rather than emotion. So, like I said, different. We talked about, can personalities change in the beginning. This isn't even necessarily a shadow self thing, but this is a thing where you might have to this inferior function is not a strength for me, but I have to turn it into a strength based on some of the things, or I have to rely on it more. I at least have to make it not a weakness. It says when faced with stress, an INFP might suddenly become very pragmatic and detail oriented, focusing on logic rather than emotion. Or also, when it says pragmatic and detail oriented, for me, again, as an entrepreneur, someone who was stressed trying to start a business, trying to handle a lot of different shit, this bringing this function a little bit more to the forefront, relying on it a little bit more, developing it, strengthening it, which, by the way, as time goes on in your life, the tertiary and inferior functions kind of come online a little bit more in like your 20s and 30s. So even though it says it's a largely unconscious influence, I had to develop it a little bit. I know I said like using a calendar and stuff is more of a J versus P thing, but I did also have to kind of rely on this a little bit to be detailed when it came to running my own business. Like, as much as I'd like to think about the big picture, I still have to get shit done. And I still actually, especially with websites, technical stuff, you have to become, I can't, it's not enough to feel a certain way about the code of a website. No, I have to use logical processes to make sure the code is correct. Like, I can't feel it should work. I have to just logically make sure it fucking works so that the website works, right? So these things, based on what I was doing and what I wanted to do, in some cases had to be developed or strengthened a little bit. When you add all these up based on how we operate, again, that is why when it comes to popular INFP careers, for example, artist, counselor, graphic designer, psychologist, social worker, writer, how do we feel and what are the possibilities? How can we fix this? When it comes to feelings, I'm super interested in people. When I hear about their problems, how do I feel about them? Well, how can I help fix this? How can I help heal it for them? My mind explodes with possibilities. When I hear someone's story, it's like, okay, what do I know about this? What are they telling me? How do these things interconnect? What is it? If anyone was watching the stream last night, they saw me do this with someone on the stream itself. In fact, one of my friends who was watching was like, you went into Everclear mode, or the Everclear zone is what he called it. Because when someone starts talking to me, I just go into this mode where it's like, okay, tell me about this, tell me about that. And what I'm doing is my head is up here. I'm just thinking and connecting different pieces of information, trying to figure out this puzzle, to figure out how I can help this person solve this problem and heal from it and be better. That's how my two main functions interact with one another. That's why I am the way I am. That's what I do. It's how I'm able to do this. That's why this is important. And that's why, while a surface level of MBTI can actually still be useful to you, like even if you just knew your type and knew that, oh well, these careers, like if you didn't even look into the functions and you just looked at the careers, it's like, okay, well, that makes sense. That would be useful. But if you actually learned a little bit about the cognitive functions and how you operate, that can really assist you in understanding yourself, where you have blind spots, where your strengths are, why you might like a certain job with certain aspects of it, but not other aspects of it. What can you do to change that? What can you double down on? Where do you need to get a little bit stronger? Like all these things, this kind of takes it and puts it in, interestingly enough, a little bit more concrete terms, something that you can look at and go, oh, okay, that makes sense. This is how I function. This is, if you lift the hood of me, you can see like this is all the different parts and how they work together to make the engine run, to make the car go. And again, not only that, but you can then look at other people that you know and try to figure out why they are the way they are. So, for example, let's see. I've been talking with someone who's an ISFP lately. Now, this is and kind of thinking about why, in some ways, like it's interesting. In some ways, like we're like right together with one another, like as far as what we're saying, what our values are, and all that kind of stuff. But then, like sometimes the communication's like, why don't you understand me, right? So I actually looked up, I said, what's going on here, right? So the interesting thing is that their dominant function is the same as mine. How do I feel about this, right? So with ISFPs, they also care about people and making the world a better place. But whereas my auxiliary function is thinking about possibilities and how can we, what can we do and what's the big picture of all this, their function is their auxiliary function is extroverted sensing, which is what are the practical solutions to just fix this right now? Like, we're in the present. I don't care about big plans and all this other shit. Like, what's going on? Okay, well, what's a very practical thing we can do to fix this? Let's just fix it, right? And then also, because of the S and N difference, when I'm talking, I'm using very big, vague kind of terms and using analogies and metaphors and connecting all different ideas, and they're just like, what the fuck does any of this... Fact. Let's just look at the facts of this situation, right? Why are we talking about all this other shit? Let's just look at this, right? And it doesn't mean either of us are wrong. It's just, when I am talking to them, I have to go, okay, let me think here. What is a way that I can simplify this and make this more concrete to get my point across, So yeah, again, I already covered introverted feeling, but then the way it combines for them with their auxiliary compared to me is different. And so while we both might have the same values, the same things we care about, the same goals of helping people, making the world a better place, their approach to it is going to be different than mine, which is okay. You need all different kinds of people, right? And in fact, in a certain way, that makes us a really good team, because I can say, well, like, here's all the plans, and then they can kind of see a bigger picture and then look at, like, oh, this is a really good concrete thing we could do, like an actual detailed task we could do to address this part, and here's another thing we could do. And they can help make actual realistic, grounded plans rather than just like, well, we should do this. Okay, well, what are the steps to do this? Well, they can figure out the steps. They would be really good at looking at that and taking it and go, okay, well, here's actually how we're going to lay this all out and accomplish it. This is where I actually fall short. I can see big pictures, but I'm very bad about detailed instructions and all that kind of stuff. They can complement me strongly here because we both have the same value in what we want to achieve. They can help with the actual detailed plans, whereas I can kind of see the bigger picture and help orchestrate moving to while they're so present focused, I can see the future more. Can't see the future, but I'm thinking about the future, and I can make sure that there's a bigger purpose, that if we enact these things, we're moving towards this goal rather than maybe just kind of doing these things, but by making them more in service to a bigger goal in the future, we can make sure that they are super, super effective rather than just something we're doing and we're alleviating something small in the moment, but it's not really helping overall, right? If that makes sense. Then their tertiary function is introverted intuition. So as they take in details about the world through their senses, and the auxiliary function, just because it's not the dominant, the first two are super strong. They play together, and that's kind of you. The tertiary and the inferior matter, but those two and how they play together are such massive drivers in how you operate in the world. They often develop gut feelings about events and situations. Now, this is where this might get a little bit zodiac-y or horoscopy, because it's really, we all have gut feelings, right? I get that. What it's trying to say is, while they generally do not like abstract concepts or ideas, this introverted intuition function may lead them to experience epiphanies about themselves and others. So, just because you are super practical, you're focused on the world and your senses and all that stuff, it doesn't mean you don't also have intuitions. It's just that's kind of in the back a little bit more. So, you know, this person, an ISFP, might be gaining more information and using more thought processes and making more decisions based on kind of what they're sensing and feeling in the world, or just sensing. I say feeling, but only because it's a sense. Whereas my extroverted intuition function is a auxiliary or secondary function. That intuition is a much bigger deal for me than sensing. Sensing is my tertiary function, and it's an introverted one rather than an extroverted one for them. And then their inferior function, extroverted thinking. One weakness they may have is in organizing, although they may use this function more prominently in certain situations. This function is all about looking for the most efficient way to do something. This is actually interesting because this person, from talking to them, I've gotten them to at least begin to use the calendar. But they are such a doer usually, they just get to work, right? The only thing it really helps with is reminding them of, oh, I have an appointment, or this is when a birthday is, because they're not really good at remembering birthdays. Which isn't that they don't care, but it, you know, as I kind of said, it's like, well, if you care, it takes 2 seconds to set up a system that'll remind you. You know, and when you find a birthday out, you just go in and put it in there, and then you'll never forget again. And so they do put in the things that they are scheduled for, but unlike me, they don't schedule all their work in or time block or do any of that kind of stuff. It's like, no, this is only to show me, yes, I have to be here to go to the dentist, or I have to be there for, I need to pick something up at this store or something like that. But the rest of their day is not blocked off at all. They just show up and they start getting to work. Whereas for me, that's not me at all. I don't want to get to work. I want to think about shit like that. I want to think about possibilities. I want to play with ideas. I want to research whatever's on my mind. It's a totally different thing for me compared to them to just get to work. And they've even been like, you know what you need to do, just like get started. You know, it's like I'm developing that more and more, but that's not my dominant or auxiliary function like it is for them. ISFPs are doers. They get shit done. This person is pretty productive. They multitask a lot. I'm not going to get into multitasking right now and whether that's a real thing or not, but that's another discussion. And I know other people who are S's who it's like they're just getting shit done, whereas they look at me as like, you're a procrastinator. And procrastination is a thing. But often, in some cases, it's not even that I'm procrastinating, it's just that I'm thinking a lot about how I feel about things. I'm connecting ideas. I'm constantly playing with ideas. That's just how I operate, right? And it's why I can get on a stream and talk and just be, as I'm talking, I'm thinking and I'm connecting ideas and I'm playing with stuff and I'm answering questions for people. When I'm coaching people, I'm talking to them. How do I feel about this? I'm thinking, I'm connecting ideas. How can I help this person? The fact that I can troubleshoot very well and that I have that extroverted intuition auxiliary function when I'm coaching coaching is asking a ton of questions to someone. It's about understanding and making connections and then asking a question so that they hopefully have an answer and a realization about themselves, right? My functions play really well into what I do when I'm coaching someone because of that. And, you know, again, even when people start chatting and they start asking questions, it's today, can your type ever change over time? Boom. All right, let me think all the possibilities of how this could be so that I can answer this very fully. Right? I don't just say yes or no. Like I'm jumping all around as far as what all the possibilities are and connecting them all to some bigger point. So this is actually really, really, and then that person, interestingly enough, um, they just recently got a degree, and I know part of it was because they, first off, they've done some of the things on this list before. They got a degree that's not on this list. And actually, they've done two things on this list, and I know they liked at least one of them, and one of them they consider a dream job, but they felt it wasn't, or it was related to one of these, but they felt that the money wasn't there, and so they just recently got a degree for something not on this list. I don't know how that's going to go in the long term for them, but on this list right here, one of them is something they absolutely love to do, but they don't do it for pay. It's like their hobby and their passion. And the other thing is something they have done for pay, but the pay wasn't very good. But it's like, that's my dream job, and if I ever just had enough money and I hit the lottery, if I was still going to work, that's what I would do. So it's, again, it's interesting, and you know, maybe had they known about this, maybe they would have chosen a different degree, where something out here they felt they could hopefully make some more money with it than one of the other things on this list, if money is a concern, and it is a concern for a lot of people. But it's important that, as well, to I think we'd all like to have money. The thing is, once you reach a certain level of money, your happiness doesn't really increase, and it's not a great amount of money. It's certainly like middle-class money. So if you think $160,000 is going to make you happier than $60,000, not really. It makes things a bit more comfortable, and it's possible if you avoid the hedonic treadmill, which is basically as your money increases, or you know, as your money and opportunities increase, you basically kind of keep up. So it's like, all right, when I was making $50,000 a year, maybe I was driving just a basic, you know, a Honda Civic. Now that I'm making $160,000 a year, I'm driving like a really nice Lexus, right? Well, you get a small boost in those 2 weeks from buying a nicer car, but then it just becomes a new normal, right? But now you're just spending because you have that much more money. If you can avoid that, if you can keep making money, but stay used to the Honda Civic, for example, then it's going to make things way more comfortable because you'll have a lot of security. You'll be able to kind of get through when there's a pandemic or something that comes along. But generally speaking, the important thing to know is, as long as you have any kind of decent career, and or if you and your partner both basically make enough money to reach a certain minimum level, your happiness doesn't really increase too much. And so the important thing that and furthermore, if you're doing things for money and it's not what you actually want to do, or even it doesn't align on some level, like there's things I don't necessarily want to do as far as what I'm doing now with streaming. Like I like streaming, I like helping people and all that kind of stuff. There's still tasks I need to do in relation to this that I will eventually outsource when it gets to that point. Now is not that time. Now is the time to grind and do other things, and I'm just doing it all myself. But there's certain things I wish I could just be like, you do this. And there are things I outsource already because I just don't have the talent or skill to do them. If you're doing things just because it's like, oh, well, this is a good career that will make me money, and it's not super in tune with your personality type and your functions and all that kind of stuff, similar to the experience I had working on the phones in Verizon, while you may get something out of it, while it may help develop you a little bit more, while it was great for me to be able to talk on the phone and make sales calls with clients, or do project calls or coaching calls or whatever else at this point, and I've carried that with me, and it was, looking back, it was an experience I needed for those 2 years. But I also, my mental health was so bad that I was taking every other day off by the end. At the very end, I asked for 6 weeks of leave because my mental health was so shot. And then I couldn't even go back to work after that. They just fired me because I didn't show back up after those 6 weeks. I was taking time off left and right. Luckily I had accrued a lot of paid time off, but then at a certain point I just started taking time off that was unpaid, and I just eventually lost my job. And luckily it was a big company that just had a ton of people that could afford to have people call out because we were in a giant call center. If it was a small company that I was relied upon, way more, they would. So don't do things just for money. It will affect your mental health. And if you're watching this, you maybe are interested in mental health. And maybe you're struggling with mental health. If that's the case, try taking an MBTI test, see what type you are, see how you operate in the world, see what things matter to you, see how you think and what your cognitive functions are, see what careers might align with that, and if any of this is out of alignment with what you're actually doing, strongly consider making a change. Whew. Since we have only about 20 minutes left, I'll also talk about my own personal experience with this and how it can, things to watch out for. Specifically, if your type really aligns with another type. So I want to kind of pull this one up. I really like this graphic that I found because you see, this is kind of how people are grouped into these 4 quadrants based on the letters. So there's the NF and the NT, and then the SF and the ST, right? It's those middle letters again. If you are an N type, you're thinking about possibilities in the future. If you're an S type, you're thinking about what's present and real now. If you are an F type, right, I said it's more personal, it's more feelings. If you're a T type, it's more logical, and you can kind of see if you are like me, an INFP, you're up in this quadrant, the NFs, manifesting universal values and valuing people. There is no way I can date a ST. We are going to be so different. It's going to be fucking miserable. It's just going to be miserable. It was miserable. I can tell you it was miserable. I was married to him. It was fucking miserable. But, if the people in the same quadrant, I know when I'm talking to another NF. I know. It is like fucking boom. Like, we start talking and like we are on the same page and we are connecting so strongly that it's like, holy shit, I feel like I've known you my entire fucking life. Now, I'm not saying that hasn't happened with some other people, but like, I know our communication and our values and our thoughts are in such alignment. Like, I know immediately. Like, I start talking to another NF, within a few minutes, it's like we are good friends, very good friends. I remember talking to someone. What was it? Was it last year? I think it was about a year and a half ago now. I knew someone from years ago as an acquaintance, and I reconnected with them. And as we started talking and actually just talking more than just on an acquaintance level of like, hey, I know where you exist, but more like, how's it been? What's going on with you? And all that kind of stuff. Like, within a few minutes, it was like, boom, this person and I were we were chatting so, like, you couldn't talk fast enough to communicate to one another, right? The problem with that is while your communication might be great, your blind spots may also be the same. And your strengths and your weaknesses might align so strongly in the sense that you both have the same strengths and the same weaknesses that you don't necessarily challenge one another or help one another see things from different perspectives and things like this because you're so in alignment. And it was the case. I thought when I first learned I was an INFP. Actually, not when I first learned. For about a year, I was around other INFPs, and I was like, I think I would want to be with someone like this because I was with someone who was so opposite. I did wind up. My ex-wife was an INFP. We connected so strongly. The communication was it's always been phenomenal between her and I. As far as understanding one another. What got in the way was her trauma and being afraid to being damaged, being afraid to open up, for various reasons she couldn't tell me her opinions and stuff, but then was resentful and was just kind of holding everything in, and it just kind of exploded eventually. But that's besides the point. The problem is, by both being INFPs, neither one of us ever pushed the other to like get out and go out into the world, right? It's like we were just comfortable being homebodies. It's good to get out and go out sometimes, we let each other slide too much on too many things that we weren't super strong on or that we had weaknesses on. It was like, because we understood what it was like and we struggled with those same things, we were kind of often letting each other off the hook for things where sometimes it would be good if a partner came along and was like, no, you really need to get this done. Again, both head in the clouds, it was difficult for both of us to actually get shit done. I'm not saying that we never got stuff done. I'm just saying for both of us, getting stuff done took a lot longer than it might take other people, especially down here at the bottom half, like in the present, these people, getting shit done. So it's something to watch out for if the other person and their type and your type align so much. I'm not saying it can't work. In fact, I think it can often work really well, but you probably need to have a self-awareness if you go down that path, if you have someone who's not challenging you. Now, the shitty thing is, I felt that person was like my soulmate, right? But now I'm also starting to value that if I don't have that necessarily like NF connection, but then another person who's maybe in the blue quadrant over here or the yellow quadrant over here could be just a little bit different and kind of show me my blind spots or help me grow or challenge me and whatnot. That can be really good and useful. And it is kind of a more mature and maybe realistic way of looking at relationships, as opposed to, especially me as a hopeless romantic INFP, just the idealistic relationship ideals that I had when I was younger. And part of this also comes from a book I mentioned last week when I was talking about books. There's an author, Robert A. Johnson, who writes a lot of short, like 80 to 100 page books, talking a lot about Jungian psychology and all that kind of stuff. The book was called We, and I read this as I was struggling in the relationship with the other INFP, my ex-wife, a few years ago. And he laid out in the beginning what I wanted to hear about relationships being about love and just a very idealistic way of looking at it. And he was using believe it was the tale of Tristan and Isolde from Arthurian legends, um, kind of laying it out and talking about what people often think, and kind of saying like, well, this is the Disney fairy tale that a lot of people are looking for and all that kind of stuff. And he actually brought it around almost in a way. It was like a hard reality that almost hurt a little bit, where he was talking about like, yeah, like the love and stuff is good, but you also need like a realistic base, a foundation where it's, also just two people kind of working together and relying on one another. And like, while the love is good, there's like a reality to it, where you're both, you know, working to help one another grow and survive in the world, and get shit done and keep advancing and keep moving forward. He called it, someone. What sticks out in my mind is he was talking about a story, and it was about like someone just like stirring oatmeal. Like you can think about like this Disney love, but like in the morning, someone has to like make breakfast and like fucking stand there and stir the oatmeal. Like that's not a super romantic idea. It's just sitting there over a fucking pot, stirring it. But like that's something that like needs to be done. There's things like that, and you can extrapolate that out in a relationship, where it's like this is just something that needs to be done for the relationship to keep functioning. There's like a reality to it. There's concrete things that need to happen. It can't just all be this airy fairy, oh my god, so in love. We don't see in the Disney stories, like after the prince and princess get together, that like someone still has to fucking cook dinner that night, and someone has to wash the dishes and shit. So, and in a similar way, not only are you helping one another just kind of get through the world and get through the day and keep going, it is the case where you can complement one another by having differences, so that if I'm weak in an area and they're strong, even if that means there's sometimes struggles because of those differences, it can also be a benefit. So something to keep in mind just from a relationship perspective, romantically, but also this is the case with your friends as well. So I can think of some of my friends, and I know one of them is an S-type, and I know that they're very much a doer and they get shit done. Actually, I have a few S-types in my life, and they are like, they hear me lament getting stuff done, and they're like, yeah, I would not approach the day like you do. I think you think too much. You just need to fucking get started and start doing stuff. You plan too much. You overplan. You probably spend half an hour just fucking with your calendar and to-do list before you even get started. In those 30 minutes, you could have gotten shit done, right? Like, just start doing stuff, and stuff will get done. They're not wrong, but again, personality type differences. And I try. I do try. I've been trying to implement that more and more myself personally, and take their advice more. So, it can be really good to have a variety of people around you that their skills and talents and their way of looking at things can make you more well-rounded and better, help you have insights and all that kind of stuff. I don't think that means you go to your friends group and go, what type are you? What type are you? What type? Do we have an even distribution of types? That's not it. And, chances are your best friends are probably going to be in the same quadrant as you are. Like I said, I have my sister's in ENFP. I get along with her. If we ever like get lunch together or something and we start talking, all of a sudden it's like 3 hours later. It's like, where the fuck did the time go? Because we just like connect and we start talking about ideas and we start talking the same way, and boom. My best friend in Houston, my mentor, is an ENFP, and it's the same thing. We just click, we connect, boom. Um, but yeah, m- I I used to have, I think, a more immature view where I wanted to be just around the kind of people that I connected with the most, and I didn't want to deal with all these other types. I still might not want to necessarily deal with the type of people in the red quadrant, um, but that's not ultimately the case because even recently I can think of people who are in this quadrant who I've met and connected with and had good connections with them. And so more and more, I don't look at these people as enemies, and I also don't think your type just is who you are. You can be a good ENTP and a cool person and all that, and you can be a massive asshole ENTP. Same with ESTJ or ESFP or ISFJ or INTJ or INFP for that matter. You can be an asshole INFP. It would probably be pretty rare because we are constantly worried about feelings and people and stuff, but you could have someone who's just in a really bad spot that could be a massive asshole. If they are really stressed, depressed, and whatnot, uh, one of the pages earlier talked about shadow functions, and when someone is super stressed or depressed, going back to asking about can your personality change? It's not that your personality changes, it's that your depression and stress makes the other functions actually come out and it's as if you are a different person. So, no one here is bad just because of their type. You might have more struggles of communication, and again, depending on the relationship you have with them, whether it's like a coworker or a friend or a good friend or a partner or a family member. You know, there's a lot of struggles between family members if you have vastly different types. You can have struggles even if they're the same type. But, definitely if I remember, if you have an INFP and they have a boss who's an ESTJ, that INFP is going to get fired. The boss will hate them. They won't even know, like they will just be so frustrated by the INFP that it's like, I need this person off my team. This is not working. You're so different that it is just going to be such a clash. But also you can, it's funny I say that, but if you know, then you can alter how you talk to them and work with them, and it can make it better. If you're unaware, it's likely, if you're unaware of this, if you're unaware of how you are and how they are, it can be the case that it's like, we just can't connect. This person, my boss is an asshole, and the boss is like, this person's fucking useless, right? Again, going ESTJ versus INFP. And I had a boss who was an ESTJ. Actually, I think he was possibly an ESTP, come to think of it. Um, Either way, it's pretty far away from INFP, and we were leery for a long time. Like, I could tell this boss did not understand me at all. Like, I was an anomaly to him, but I seemed like a good guy, probably. To him, I could tell, like, he thought I was a decent dude. Once I started thinking in this way about him and what he wanted to see and all that kind of stuff, and started acting in a certain way, things changed. And there's more to that story, but I'm not going to get into it because we're at the very end. But things did change, and I actually probably became one of his favorites. But again, that was because I had to think, how can I accomplish what my boss is looking for me to accomplish? So this can be really useful in that realm as well, if you're struggling with these things. If you're not struggling, I still think it's useful to check out MBTI and just kind of learn just for your own insight. And I have to think that somewhere in everyone's life, there's probably some kind of struggle a little bit that maybe this could help with. There might be one friend who it's like, why are we sometimes on different pages? Why in my relationship do we seem to fight about like this stuff? It doesn't necessarily have to be related to communication issues from this. It could just be you're fighting because one of you has some trauma around an issue and it keeps getting triggered by the other person. That's a possibility too. But it's possible that this kind of thing could help. So, the camera didn't die. Yay. I'm so glad that that didn't happen. I've been thinking about running like a cord all around the room and taking one of my other webcams and just making like an open cam. Just kind of have it sit like right there on him. It could just be in the corner so you guys all can get like just a shot of him, not just in the background, kind of fuzzy there. Maybe just like you could be the virtual therapy dog for everyone. As I sit here and talk about stuff, you can just kind of focus on him and ignore me. And you probably get more out of it sometimes. I think this is probably a good place to stop. I think that covers MBTI well enough for anyone to get started, why it's important, what I get from it, what you could get from it, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I'll be back here tomorrow, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time, for the final one of the week. If you like this, if you're still watching, if you haven't already, follow, join Discord, subscribe to the YouTube, anything like that. If you have any questions that you want to ask, or you want me to, anything you want me to talk about on the stream, things that I haven't covered yet, or some that I have, you can DM me on Discord or ask in our Discord general chat rooms. And I think that's about it. Thanks for watching, everyone. Have a good rest of your Wednesday. See ya.